this earlier. So I'm going to repeat in a minute what the assignment is as soon as the YouTube comes up. And then I'll do attendance. I don't know. Looks like it might be glitching. All right, good morning. Good morning. If you just came in, I just let a couple of people in. We are looking at the assignment on your to-do list that says Intro to Ecosystems. You have two pictures. They're comparing two pictures. They're comparing Tybee Island to the Blue Ridge ecosystem. So we want to know what, okay, there it is. It's finally loading. All right. So we're comparing on your to-do list, we're comparing the Blue Ridge and mountains with the, okay. It was taping. All right, so now I know it's up. So it is live now. You'll be able to get the recordings from here on out, and the link is on your dashboard. Okay, so I'm gonna stop looking at that, do attendance. So if you just came in and you can't find the assignment, let me know. It's on your to-do list. And we're only taking till 10:45 to do it. It's just kind of like a morning warm-up activity. All right, another couple of minutes. Again, if you finish the activity, come back to the module and we need to talk about what is an ecosystem. Um, 3 for each would be fine. It's worth 6 points. So if you define what kind of ecosystem each one is, that's 2. And if you give me 2 sentences that describe what's going on in each ecosystem, that's 3 each. So 6 sentences total will be fine. And again, it should be 3, 3 and 3. So name the ecosystem, 2 points or 2 sentences describing that ecosystem, that particular ecosystem. And that should be sufficient. And good job, good job. Everybody's here today. 100% attendance. Always good, always good. All right. Okay, so while some of you are finishing that up, just do a quick recap of how we got to where we are at the moment. So we looked at biological organizations and we talked about cells are the basic unit of living things and they're made of molecules, and we went all the way up the scale looking at whole organisms and the cells make tissues, tissues make organs make organ systems, and then we have a whole organism, which brought us to this 5th level. So we're, like I said yesterday, we're going to spend most of our time on this 5th level because that is what environmental science is about. So we start off with what is an organism, and we move up to a group of as one individual. Then you have a group of those same kind of individuals. And again, they can be plant or animal, but they're living things, not non-living things. And then you take different groups of populations and they live in the same place. So that's a community. And then you can have, once you leave community, then we start adding in the non-living aspects of our environment. Okay, so this is where we are now. We're at the ecosystem level, and we are going to start looking at what effect does um, our, our abiotic factors have on our living population. Okay, so the non-living is just as important as the living factors. All right, so that brings us to our next module, where we are today. Alrighty, so this is where we are in the module. So if you take a break from what you're doing and give your attention over here, uh, you can finish that up if we have a few minutes at the end of class. All right, so they had those 2 pictures. Like I said, I just took this that assignment straight off the introduction to this activity. And it says, besides being two different vacation spots, each is an example of an ecosystem. So that's what you were looking up. And this brings us to our study of ecology. I think I said to you yesterday, anything that ends in ology is the study of. And so whatever is in front of that, your prefix tells you what you're studying. So we are studying interactions between the living and the non-living in an environment. All right, let's look at what Mr. Talks Too Fast has to say.
There's a lot of ideas that we just assume that we know a lot about because we hear about them all the time. For instance, I know what pop music is, but if you were to corner me at a party and say, Hank, what is pop music? I'd be like, it's like the music that plays on the pop station. Just because we're familiar with the concept does not mean that we actually understand it. Ecology is kind of the same way, even though it's a common everyday concept, and ecosystem is a word that we hear a lot. I think most of us would be a little stumped if somebody actually asked us what an ecosystem is, or how one works, or why they're important, etc. I find it helps to think of an ecosystem, a collection of living and non-living things interacting in a specific place, as one of those Magic Eye posters for those of you who were sentient back in 1994. An ecosystem is just a jumble of organisms and weather patterns and geology and other stuff that don't make a lot of sense together until you stare at them long enough from far enough away, and then suddenly a picture emerges. And just like with Magic Eye posters, it helps if you're listening to Jamiroquai while you're doing it. So the discipline of ecosystem ecology, just like other types of ecology we've been exploring lately, looks at a particular level of biological interaction on Earth. But unlike population ecology, which looks at interactions between individuals of one species, or community ecology, which looks at how bunches of living things interact with each other, ecosystem ecology looks at how energy and materials come into an ecosystem, move around in it, and then get spat back out. In the end, ecosystem ecology is mostly about eating, who's eating whom, and how energy, nutrients, and other materials are getting shuffled around within the system. So today, we're setting the record straight. No more not understanding how an ecosystem works, starting now. So ecosystems may be a lot like Magic Eye posters, but the way that they're not like a Magic Eye poster is in the way that posters have edges. Ecosystems! I'll just come out and say it, no edge, only fuzzy, ill-defined gradients that bleed into the ecosystems next door. So actually defining an ecosystem can be kinda hard. Mostly it depends on what you want to study. Say you're looking at a stream in the mountains. The stream gets very little sunlight because it's so small that the trees on its banks totally cover it with shade. As a result, very few plants or algae live in it, and if there's one thing that we know about planet Earth, it's that plants are king. Without plants, there are no animals. But somehow, there's a whole community of animals living in and around this mountain stream, even though there are few plants in it. So what are the animals doing there, and how are they making their living? From the land, of course, from the ecosystems around it. Because no stream is an island, it isn't there all by itself. All kinds of food and nutrients and other materials drop into the stream from the trees or are washed into it when it rains. Leaves and bugs, you name it, flow down from neighboring terrestrial ecosystems. And that stuff gets eaten by bigger bugs, which get eaten by fish, which in turn are eaten by raccoons and birds and bears. So even though the stream's got its own thing going on, without the rest of the watershed, the animals there wouldn't survive. And without the stream, plants would be thirsty and terrestrial animals wouldn't have as many fish to eat. So where does the ecosystem of the stream start and where does it end? This is a perennial problem for ecologists because the way it works, energy and nutrients are imported in from someplace, they're absorbed by the residents of an ecosystem and then passed around within it for a little while and then finally passed out, sometimes into another ecosystem. This is most obvious in aquatic systems where little streams eventually join bigger and bigger waterways until they finally reach the ocean. This flow is a fundamental property of ecosystems. So at the end of the day, how you define an ecosystem just depends on what you want to know. If you want to know how energy and materials come in, move through, and are pooped out of a knot in a tree that has a very specific community of insects and protists living in it, you can call that an ecosystem. If you want to know how energy and materials are introduced to, used, and expelled by the North Pacific Gyre, you can call that an ecosystem. And if you want to know how energy and materials move around a cardboard box that has a rabbit and a piece of lettuce in it, you can call that an ecosystem. I might tell you that your ecosystem...
All right, that was a clip from a larger video, and that I don't know that you got a total understanding of that, but this is the definition that you need to understand, and I'm going to show you a better video than that one. in just a second. But this is the definition that you need to be familiar with. Also, remember that we are going to do a unit test at the end of this entire unit. So keep in mind vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. Make sure that you can relate your vocabulary. All right, so it is an interaction between the living and the non-living things within a specific space. So when we talk about a specific space, we're calling that space an ecosystem. And different ecosystems have different names. So real quick, somebody pop into the chat. What is the name of the ecosystem that you found for Tybee Island? So they had different names, different names. For Tybee Island? I'm not sure that that's what Tybee Island should have been. Is that what they told you? But think about it. It's an island. So what kind of ecosystem would it be more like? Anybody else got something other than grassland for the ecosystem for Tybee Island? Okay, aquatic, that's the word I was looking for. Somebody else put here that it's a subtropical coastal ecosystem. And that's a way of describing it too. It's a coastal ecosystem. So being an aquatic ecosystem and inland is different from being a coastal aquatic ecosystem. So there is a difference. So all of those things are good. Anthony put down that it is a barrier island. So that's a description of what it is. And we're going to talk later on about barrier islands, what their function is and what's there. Salt marsh, marine coast, I like those. All right, yeah, I would not describe it as a grassland. The other answers, all of those can be good. So it is definitely a coastal ecosystem, and it's an aquatic coastal ecosystem. It is a barrier island in that it is on the outside of most of the states, so we can use those descriptions for that type of ecosystem. All right, like I said, I have a better description of ecosystems than that crazy guy. So let's watch that.
Your father knows about saving
Without
money.
the
Everything I'm wearing,
commercial.
I've had since boot camp.
And this will be
Do you know
in
that
your
butterflies have
playlist.
receptors that allow them to taste using their feet? Or that their taste buds are 200 times stronger than humans? Did you also know that there's a type of shark that glows in the dark? Or that koalas can sleep a total of up to 20 hours a day? Can you imagine how interesting life would be if we had characteristics similar to some of these animals? All living organisms are different from each other and have evolved over many years to survive as they interact in their environment and with other species. Scientists use the term population to define all members of one species that can reproduce and live in the same area. An example of a population that interacts with an environment is all the white-tailed deer that live in a forest. White-tailed deer are all the same species. They interact with each other and they reproduce with each other. We call one species of the same organism a population. A community is different from a population because it is made up of two or more species living in an area. For example, if you were to visit the White River National Forest in Colorado, you would see various living things interacting with each other. You may experience the smell of juniper and blue spruce and see populations of deer, elk, mountain lions, and various species of bees. This is a community because you have various living things that occupy and reside in an area. Ecosystems are different from communities because they're made up of living and non-living things. a swamp, an ocean, and a forest are all examples of ecosystems. In an ecosystem, you will find living things such as animals, bacteria, and plants, but also non-living things such as rocks, air, water, sunlight, and shelter. Scientists refer to all living things as biotic and all non-living things as abiotic. In an ecosystem, organisms live in communities with different species where they are interdependent, where they need each other and the environment they live in to survive. Most of the energy that enters an ecosystem is in the form of sunlight. Plants absorb light energy and convert it to food through a chemical process known as photosynthesis. Since plants make their own food and don't depend on another living organism, they're considered producers. A producer is any organism that has the ability to produce its own food. Consumers are organisms that depend on other organisms for food. There are 3 types of consumers: herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Herbivores are organisms that eat plants, seeds, or fruit to survive. For example, a butterfly, ant, snail, koala, deer, and a horse all depend on different plants to survive. Carnivores are organisms that mostly eat other animals and insects to survive. Some carnivores include sharks, lions, hyenas, polar bears, frogs, and snakes. These all eat other animals for survival. Omnivores are organisms that eat both plants and other animals to survive. Some examples of omnivores include grizzly bears, groundhogs, snapping turtles, hedgehogs, monkeys, and humans. These organisms eat both plants and animals to survive. Decomposers are made up of bacteria and fungi and are also important in an ecosystem. They're tiny organisms that break up dead animals and plants for food. Producers, consumers, and decomposers are all part of an ecosystem where they depend on each other to transfer energy and survive. For example, a deer depends on plants to survive. Without plants, a deer wouldn't have any food to eat. There are also many animals that depend on deer as a source of food in an ecosystem. Some carnivores that eat deer include wolves, bears, and mountain lions. Decomposers also play an important role in breaking up dead organisms and recycling nutrients back into an ecosystem. In an ecosystem, organisms also need non-living things to survive. An animal or insects might use a rock for shelter. Non-living elements such as water, carbon dioxide, oxygen, sunlight, and rocks are all important for organisms to survive in an ecosystem. Let's review what we learned. Scientists use the term population to define all members of one species living in an area. A community is made up of 2 or more species living in a particular area. Ecosystem is a community of organisms that live in a habitat and depend on each other, along with the non-living components that make up an environment. Living things in an ecosystem, such as plants, animals, bacteria, and fungi, are called biotic factors. Non-living things such as rocks, soil, air, and water are called abiotic factors. In an ecosystem, you will find producers, consumers, and decomposers. Producers create their own food, such as plants that use sunlight as a source of energy. Consumers depend and eat other organisms to survive. There are 3 types of consumers: herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Herbivores consume plants as a form of energy. Carnivores consume meat, and omnivores eat both plants and meat to survive. decomposers are tiny organisms that break up dead animals and plants for food. Thank you for watching. See you next time.
Okay.
This is what Ivy League universities you can.
There we go. Alrighty. That, like I said, that it will be on your playlist, so you can watch that in, because that's an excellent summary of all of the vocabulary up to now. One of the important things that they mentioned in there is and he mentioned it kind of briefly, that this is about the flow of energy. So it is important. Later on, we'll talk about food webs and food chains. It's important to understand that the relationship, the interrelationship within an ecosystem is about maintaining sustainability through gaining energy. Things die out if they don't sustain energy. How do they get energy? They eat. So it is important to know who eats who and where the energy originates. Again, the important thing to remember is the sun is always, always, always the originator of all energy. Only plants can absorb the energy directly from the sun. So whatever they store is only transferred to living things, other living things, by being eaten. So you have your herbivores that eat the plants and they get that energy from the plants. And then you have those carnivores that eat the herbivores and they get the energy from that came from the plant indirectly from the herbivore. And then those that eat both get their energy indirectly from either the plant or the animal that is eaten. So it is about a transfer of energy. Okay. All righty. The other thing we want to look at is there are different ecosystems. All right, quickly tell me. So they said both of those ecosystems at the beginning were in Georgia. What did they tell you about the Blue Ridge? What kind of ecosystem is that? And I almost said it in my description of it. Anybody been up to the Blue Ridge? It kind of tips at the top of Georgia. Somebody type in the chat what you know about Blue Ridge. Blue Ridge. What is Blue Ridge? It's a forest ecosystem, mountain ecosystem. So both answers are correct. So it's a mountainous forest ecosystem. It's very beautiful. What's a unique characteristic? Anybody know a unique characteristic about the Blue Ridge Mountains? Ever been to Gatlinburg, Tennessee? Anybody? What's another mountain range that they have there in Tennessee? And why is it called that? Anybody know? Anybody? All right, Sarah, thank you. Smoky Mountains, Smoky Mountains. You know why they're called Smoky Mountains? Not because they're always smoking and not because Smokey the Bear lives there. You've been to Ruby Fall. I've been there too. That's beautiful. All right, the Smoky Mountains are called the Smoky Mountains because they're so high that the clouds tend to sit on top of the mountain, so it looks like they're surrounded by smoke, but it's really clouds. But it gives the appearance of being a smoky mountain. All right, if you look at this map, these are all the different types of ecosystems that we have. And we also call them biomes. So there's a difference between the term ecosystem is local and biome is kind of a general region on the planet. And biomes are defined by their climate and precipitation. Okay. And we have these different types of biomes. So it depends. Now, its climate is going to depend on where it is as far as the equator is concerned, and the amount of precipitation that that area receives will also be an important component of describing a biome. Okay, so we look up here, and so I want you to take a few minutes to click on all of these and look at the descriptions of each biome. So up here in the north near Alaska, it is a tundra biome. It is, notice it is described by how much how cold it is and how much rainfall it gets. And then they describe, because of the temperature and amount of rainfall, you have a unique set of plants and animals that can survive there. And then you have shortly below that the taiga, and again the climate is a little bit different. Now we have cooler summers and not freezing cold, and you have a little more rainfall there. Okay, the soil is going to determine what kind of plants and animals exist there. If we look over here, this is where we live. We live in a temperate, deciduous forest. That's what they call where we live. And so it's mid-latitudes. We get a moderate, although lately we've been getting a lot of rainfall. We get more rainfall than usual. One of the distinguishing features about where we live is that the trees tend to go through a cycle of dropping their leaves. Okay, so that is a unique thing for this type of area. Japan has, I think, the same area. If you look, so it goes across the latitudes. Okay, so if you go over here to Japan and China, they have the same biome description. We have a desert. We have a desert. Some people don't realize that we have a desert in the United States, as well as deserts in Africa, and you got a desert down here in Australia. So there are different locations for desert. Now, deserts also, you can have a dry desert and a wet desert. So climate has a lot to do with that. All right, you have tropical wet forests, tropical rainforest, sometimes they call it. And notice it's in different locations. So it has to do with where it is in relation to the equator. All right, so down here we have a desert again. And a tundra is a type of desert as well, because it is cold, but it also gets very little rainfall, so it doesn't change very much there. Okay, so these are the names of the different, and then later on we'll have an activity for you to do something in a particular biome. I also want to look at, what in the world? I don't know. There it goes. All right, I don't know, my computer is slow this morning. I know there's supposed to be some words on there. I'm sure yours has words on it, so I want you to take a few minutes to, let's see what happens when you download that. All right, yeah, you should definitely download this. Okay, and notice it's a color-coded map, and you follow the color codes to tell you what type of biome it is. And then there is a description of each in it, so you won't have to look at the little dots. So definitely download this. So this is telling you everything that those little icons are telling you. All right, maybe my thing has come up. Nope, it hasn't come up yet. Let me see if I do this. Will that help? And it did. Oh, it didn't. All right, is yours blank like mine's blank? Yeah, yours is blank too. Okay. It shouldn't be. There should be the drag and click question like we had on the other page. Interesting. Interesting. All right, so we won't be doing, yeah, okay, everybody is saying it's blank on yours too. So I'm not crazy. Okay. All right, let's take a quick look at this one. And this will be the last thing we look at today. So we said that Tybee Island was an aquatic biome. It's surrounded by water. Now, we had different descriptions of it because it is an island. And so it's got the ocean on one side and we kind of have a marshy area on the other side. So take a look at the description of fresh versus salt, because that's what we're talking about. So take a few minutes to read this page and then look at, here we go, all of the aquatic areas in Georgia. So we had Tybee Island in particular. It's a pretty picture. Last November, we had a little family reunion out in Tybee Island. It's beautiful out there. Someplace I definitely would like to go back to. All right, so take a few minutes to read this page and go through all of the area. I guess you are closest. What are you closer to? The Chattahoochee? I don't think you're close to Okefenokee. You're close to the Chattahoochee River, aren't you? Okay, I see some people nodding their heads. So yeah, this would be you over here. Okay, thank you. Yes, folks, this is interactive. Nod your head, do thumbs up here, talk to me. All right, so take a look at all of these. We got a few minutes left to class, so read this page over. If you have not finished your other activity, please use that time to make sure that's in. And again, there's a lot of vocabulary, so please make sure you understand what a freshwater biome is as opposed to a saltwater ecosystem. And then when you come down and look at these, look at how it is described. So yes, everybody should be reading. And again, make sure, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Make sure you download that where is it? Make sure you download this biome breakdown, because on a test, you'll be expected to know where different biomes are located. So, and it's always a color-coded map. You'll always get a map that looks just like that, except you won't have all the lovely words at the bottom, okay? So definitely download this. Again, you're keeping a folder of notes, an electronic folder of notes of sorts. This would be a reference page that you could use on a test. So again, please make sure you download it. Hmm. Interesting. Georgia is actually a very pretty state with a lot of environmental uh, places to visit. It is fortunate to have a lot of parks, a lot of places that somebody mentioned Ruby Falls earlier. They have a lot of places that have beautiful waterfalls, fresh water, um, streams. As it says up here, it's a good place for road trips sometimes. All right, next class, we're going to spend some time on the um, bottom half of that activity. We're going to talk about the different regions. Let me share again. Again, please be reading, 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 reading. But we'll spend more time talking about the zones. So we're going to look at aquatic biomes in particular, right? And all of the regions that are mentioned there, what kind of things that you will find in those regions. All right, so we are not finished with this page by any means, but do get at least as far as looking at, before we get to the recap, looking at fresh and saltwater ecosystems and biomes. Got about 3 minutes left to class. Anybody have any questions, concerns? All right, again, hopefully you got caught up on all the assignments that are outstanding, because Infinite Campus kind of is going to update the grade book on Friday. So make sure all of your assignments are in, so that you first week of school, second week of school, your grade is reflecting what it should reflect. No zeros, no zeros. All right, let me look at that, because this is a big class. I may have gotten through, give me a second. I believe I got through most of them. All right, yeah, there's a handful of you who I still have to look at your Tragedy of the Commons, because you just turned them in. But I will definitely get those done today. Thank you. That looks like almost everybody I did today's activity. Again, folks, if you're given class time to do these, it should not be late. So you were supposed to use the first 15 minutes of class to do the ecosystem. So thank you all of you who did that. I think about 4 of you who didn't. So make sure that you get caught up on that. Got one person I need to. Again, like I said, the grade book will update tomorrow. So all of these assignments will be graded by tomorrow, probably by this afternoon. So if you just did your Tragedy of the Commons, that'll be checked right now. And then today's assignment. So you should have 4 grades, 4 things that you need to make sure that they are updated if you have not already done so. And again, kudos to those of you who have done every assignment. All right, if you have no questions for me and you're caught up, you are dismissed. Have a wonderful weekend. See you next week.